Hey everyone, it's me, Robin, and I'm here with our very special guest, Mr. Chazz. Mr. Chazz is one of my oldest TikTok friends, one of my first TikTok friends, if you can believe it. How are you today, Mr. Chazz? You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I am doing well. Yes, I think you're my first, if not maybe my first or my second TikTok friend. You're definitely the first one who is still around doing, doing your thing, doing big things. A little bit about me. My name is Mr. Chaz. I am a teacher coach. I'm a parent coach. I have in a previous life. I was an educational specialist, and my job was pretty much to teach teachers to teach and just I worked with 8 different schools and I supported inside and outside of the classrooms. And I like to say some people would describe my job as like, oh, you're kind of like a storm chaser because like whenever there's like a problem or a challenge, like you'd be the one going to it. And I'm like, yeah, that's one way to put it. But I also like the description. If anyone has ever watched Scandal, I felt kind of more like Olivia Pope sometimes.
That's how I feel.
And just kind of going into a situation and just kind of not like just having to kind of very quickly assess the situation and be helpful in a relatively short period of time. And so, I've especially since the pandemic and that, we met on TikTok, like that's how when all the teachers went home and all the parents went home, I really saw parents struggling and I wanted to find a way to contribute. And I felt like I had a lot of insight from my own journey that I wanted to share and my thought process if I can create these short videos that are enjoyable to consume. And at the end of it, you feel like you've learned something, you're expanded, your perspective is expanded a little bit, that could be really impactful and powerful and help a decent amount of people. And I guess it did because it's blown up on TikTok and on Instagram and on Facebook
Yes.
and podcasting and doing all
I see
one-on-one
you
coaching.
everywhere now. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mr. Chaz is blown up. I mean, when we started, like it was like the beginning of quarantine, like March, of 2020. Maybe you started a little bit before I did, but I feel like it was like you, me, and Heezy, Heather,
Oh,
who were
yeah,
right, and who
yeah.
were like making like parenting content like that. And now there's like so many accounts that like do that kind of stuff, and so many amazing accounts. But we were, the the first ones there. And I've always, obviously adored your content, and you just have like such a way of meeting people where they are, which is something that is so rare, and so just amazing. The way that you can kind of meet parents and see where they're struggling, but also not, shame or belittle people. Like you're very much about just that forward, progress. And we just appreciate you so much. So I wanted to ask you a few things. So what is going on new that you're doing? And then maybe after that, we could talk a little bit about like, what are some like of the major, questions, issues that you're seeing come up in your coaching sessions, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yes. So I've just been thinking about it and I feel like I've been talking about it, but like now I'm like really like in the thick of writing it. And I'm working with someone just recently and there's going to be, long story short, there's going to be a book. And it's going to be really, really helpful for people trying to break these generational cycles and patterns that I talk about a lot of my content of just these kind of unconscious or conscious patterns that we have a tendency to pass on to children. And they come from our upbringing. Sometimes we don't even think twice about what we are doing. Like it's just the way that we were raised. So we're going to do the same thing. And they're not all, some things are like good, but a lot of things are unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
or just unhealthy ways to go about emotions, unhealthy ways to go about food, unhealthy ways to, and we've been conditioned and we've learned those healthy ways. And so, the natural, normal thing is like, raise them the same way that we were raised.
Right.
But I'm encouraging parents and teachers to be a little bit more conscious about what we're passing on to our children, and to kind of take a step back and to, ask ourselves, like, what are they learning in this situation? Like, how am I being helpful here? What is the healthier way to respond, as opposed to how we tend to react in a not so healthy or helpful way?
I actually thought of you today because I knew we were having this, and I was having, I was running around last minute shopping, back to school shopping, and I was trying to work at the same time. Like it was like one of those, I'm on the phone, my kid's in the car with doctor's appointment, like whatever. And so she kept asking me stuff, and I snapped at her, and I was like. Enough, like, stop asking me. And she was like, I'm sorry. That same I'm sorry that I say now because of my childhood, that's like almost like a verbal tick that I just say all the time. And I was like,
Yeah.
stopped dead in my tracks, was like, I'm so sorry. Like, you have my full attention, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it like echoed in my head, like the way that I say I'm sorry when I'm not sorry. Like, it's just like a tick at this point. And I heard her say it, and I was like, nope, nope.
Yeah.
And I thought about all of the work you talk about how, it is so natural, right, to like reiterate the things, the way you were spoken to as a child. But, it's like that second step, right? Your first impulse might not be right, but that second impulse to go back. And I was like, okay, let's put the phone down, and focus on, repairing, not snapping, that kind of stuff, because we all do it. But
Yeah. And the reaction, like, you can't, and what I like been really hot on talking about lately, and I think it's really important to acknowledge, is that you're going to have a reaction. You may not have like an outward reaction where you're like yelling or hitting or whatever, but there's going to be a reaction in your body when you're triggered. You're going to feel something, right? And the goal is to never be triggered, or to never have that like internal reaction. The goal is to learn how to at least first be aware that you're triggered and what you're feeling, acknowledging what you're feeling, and learning to navigate through that feeling in a way that is more healthy than the snapping or the hitting or the shaming or the just dismissiveness of emotions. To be like, okay, I'm triggered. I'm experiencing some frustration here, and that's where my reaction is coming from. I can regulate, I can breathe, I have a choice in what I do here. And kind of just with what you did, to kind of just stop and pause, and to kind of move into a response where you're being more responsive as opposed to reactive. And that's it's such a hard lifelong, it's a lifelong skill, right? It's a life, like, this doesn't stop. Like, it's something that we're kind of building the foundation for, and with children, if we're kind of conscious, and we're, we can build that foundation, but it never stops. Like, learning to navigate your triggers is a lifelong thing. And even, you say like, like, I love the way that you give grace to parents and all that stuff. Like, it's something that, like, I'm still actively working on. To, like, I'll talk about it all day, but it's something that I'm so actively working on, and not just with children, but with, like, this being responsive as opposed to reactive isn't only something that is valuable with children, it's valuable with people in general. Like, I have to, when I see the comment, and it, something says something like, you should just hit them, and just blah, blah, like, whatever it is. People say a bunch of things on the internet, and sometimes I experience emotions, and I am triggered sometimes, and I have to, like, it's a practice for me to just not react, to not just lash out, and not to just like give them the talking to, and just give them the verbal like whipping, and like, and to just like, okay, you know what, like I have a choice in how I respond to this. Like, and this person on the other side may be having a hard time because of maybe something that's going on in their life right now, or their upbringing, or whatever. And I don't have to, because I don't have to take on that emotion. Like I don't have to respond with their triggeredness with
Right.
my own trigger and reactivity. And
That's
that's
a
definitely
really good
so.
point because I've never connected like my reactions to like stuff people say on TikTok because you get it on a bad day and you're like, ooh, comment react feature, boop, right? Like,
Yeah.
like someone needs to take that away from me today.
But
Because
it kind of like, I'm not gonna lie though, like it does like, ooh, and this is a good point. I'm about to bring this full. It does feel good to give someone a good talking to, and to know that
mhm,
like I got you, like I got you good,
mhm,
like I got you, like, and maybe the other person, you know, often like you'll see like people will like delete their comments and something, and I think that's often like maybe a sign that you actually, you know, that what you
one.
said really did, yeah, one, or it got to them, right? But then it's like, you know, what was my goal here, right? Like, was my goal, you know, I think, right? So obviously for children and your child, like your goal is always going to be to like help them to be healthy, you know, well balanced, you know, developed, you know, people, right? And so like you're kind of always, you know, I really do believe that parents are always like, they do want the best for their children, right? And so when I'm reacting to parents, I just have to keep in mind that it's likely, especially like if like they're like, I know it's often another parent, or it's often a parent um who feels strongly about whatever the topic is, and they want what's best for their child. Something about my video I'm talking about, and maybe I'm drawing a hard boundary
Mhm.
about like hitting children, and they feel triggered because, you know, they've hit in the past, that's something they've consciously passed down, and now you're saying, because you said that hitting children is, you know, isn't acceptable, or whatever I said in that video, now you're saying that I'm a bad parent, and that makes me feel uncomfortable, so now I'm lashing out at you. And then also this other person, you know, judge me, or there's a comment on this video where someone said something and that triggered me, and so now I left this comment because I feel, and now I'm lashing out with my reactivity. I'm expressing my feelings, and this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'm maybe trying to harm you. And I'm trying to take you down a notch because I feel bad. And yeah, I can react. The normal thing is like, oh, I'm going to take you down a notch, and see, it's going to be the battle of wills. And likely you're commenting on my video in my community. Like, I'm going to have a bunch of people to jump in and like
Yeah, like
gang up on
it's not a
you.
fair
And
fight.
it's not. And so, like, my thought was like, you know, like if I do actually want to help, if my goal is actually to help this parent or
Right.
this person, then probably giving them a good talking to isn't going to put any more skills in their tool belt. Maybe being empathetic isn't going to help them either. But one, I'm choosing like this is who I want to be. Like, and I'm choosing to not let you bring me out of character,
Mm,
um and and attack you in the same way that I felt attacked. And sometimes
yeah.
too, last note on this, sometimes too, on the internet, sometimes people don't mean things the way that I read them. And in my own state at that particular time, maybe I've just read a bunch of comments on like some other video that was really controversial. And so I'm coming into another video and they said something and they didn't use any emojis or anything. And it's only like they used 78 characters because the character limit, and I'm interpreting it in a way that feels disrespectful or feels like you're trying to do X, Y, and Z. And maybe I'm misinterpreting that. And that's happened too, where I'm being defensive in a time where they're not attacking me, but I'm taking it as an attack.
Mr. Chazz, that happens to me like 4 times a day because autism and being sensitive, and I like can't read tone on the internet, and I'm like, oh, how dare her, and then I read it again, it was like nice, like I've had my husband read them because I'm like, is this mean? And he's like, no, they're like saying like, I was like, but they said they like my shirt, and like it seems like, and this shirt isn't like cute, so they're obviously like making fun of it. And he's like, no, they like you're being weird.
And then you'll make a whole video like
I've done that so many times, and I'm like. Now when I do the comment reacts, I let them sit in the drafts for 24 hours minimum, and like to process it.
That's a good practice. And like that happens, to kind of bring this back to like parenting and even in teaching, like that happens so often in these kind of like little moments, like so I'll talk to you. So you said, oh, what's happening? I'll talk about a session that I had today that someone was we were having a conversation about, and I'll talk about kind of my common teacher thing, because I typically do more parenting, like more sessions for parents. That's a bulk of what I do for the one-on-one sessions. You get access through my Patreon, www.patreon /Mr. Chazz. But I also do like a lot of like, I'll do like sometimes going into schools and do events for like teachers and stuff like that too. So a common thing with like teachers, sometimes we'll be doing a lesson and a child, maybe they get up or they don't want to pay attention. They don't want to say critical applesauce for your 30-minute lecture or whatever it is. And so they get up or they do something else, and then like we'll take it as disrespect and feel like we need to come down, and then we react, and they react to our reaction. It becomes this big thing that it didn't really need to be. And like I could have done a lot of things. I could have used it like, oh, like maybe I'm having them sit for too long, or maybe that's a signal that this child is having a hard time sitting down for long periods of time, and I can just note that, and I can make some like my lessons active so I can reach them. There's a lot of things I could do. Oh, you can read a book or do something else like over here while I finish a lesson with the rest of the group. Like there's so many other ways that we can respond as opposed to react, but that's not typically what we do. In another situation just today, a parent was telling, I'm going to turn the light on because I'm getting a little dark in here. A parent was saying, was asking about baby talk, and was like, oh, like, child like baby talks, and this is a 5-year-old, like they baby talk, and it triggers us so much is pretty much what she was saying. And I'm like, okay, so the baby talk and you're triggered. Okay, got it. So what's your concern? And then and then she started to kind of bring out what that underlying kind of like those stories that were told, that kind of more unconscious piece that we don't even think about. A lot of times it's just react. It's a part of our story. And she's kind of started talking about how, the neighbor has like, there's a little bit of a competition between the neighbor or like different development stuff. And, she started talking about judgment from like others in, the mom group of like, and he's the only one doing the baby talk. And so we had kind of, the conversation wasn't where I think like where she wanted to go. It was like, how do I get him to stop with the baby talk? The conversation really went to, well, let's unpack why we're so triggered here and like unpack that story, maybe tell ourselves a different story. And then it kind of went into like, well, he does it with his baby brother and, his 2-year-old brother. Okay. I was like, oh, all right. So maybe is there conflict here? Like what's going on? And he was like, oh no, like they laugh. Like when he baby talks with his little brother, like he likes it and he laughs. I'm
Aw.
like, oh, so it's like they're playing and it's a way that they're kind of like communicating and like having fun, and so like again, like it doesn't really. The only problem here
What do
is
you need?
that
Oh, where's my backpack?
It's in your room. Sorry,
you're
kid.
good, you're good. Real life. The only problem is that we're triggered by the baby talk. Like
Yes.
he's speaks like he communicates well. He like it's not of like I'm worried about his speech. I'm worried about little brother's speech because there's four other people in the household who that 2-year old can learn language from, the adult, and they have also an older sister. And so it's just interesting when we kind of unpack this kind of like where our reactivity comes from.
It's so
We
interesting
may
because I see that so often. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're good.
I'm
No,
so
no, no,
bad
no,
at
continue.
I'm so bad at like knowing when to talk. My
I I need to be cut off, so I will say that. Feel free to cut me off at any point in this conversation because I need to be cut off
I
sometimes. Go
will by
ahead.
accident. So, but
Good.
they, I hear that kind of like echoes of that, and a lot of times when I talk to teachers specifically about kids like stimming in their class, and parents too, but teachers, right, have been told a story of what like an orderly class looks like, or like a
Yeah.
good classroom management, and it looks like the children not behaving like children, honestly,
Yep.
right, and so and that's the prize, and then administrators are looking for things, right, and then there's questions of, oh, are they going to think, do the veteran teachers think my class is out of control if I let them do that, or if they got observed and they're all moving around, am I going to get points off my rubric or whatever,
Yeah.
um, and actually, they'll say, oh, him hand flapping is disruptive, and my follow-up is always like, to who? To who is it disruptive? Because the other kids are fine. And usually it's that the teacher is seeing that as it is producing anxiety in them that they are not a good teacher.
Yeah.
And that is actually where it's coming from. And so I need to make you stop doing that so that I can go back to feeling like I'm in control.
Yeah.
And being okay with a reasonable amount of, kid chaos, which is what happens in a class with young children,
Yeah.
actually is like the ticket, right? It's not actually that we can make a bunch of 4-year-olds sit perfectly still for half an
Yes.
hour while you teach them
Yeah.
the days of the week.
Yes.
We all
Yes.
know that half-hour long circle time. We got the weather bear. We got the whole thing. But
Yeah.
it's really that they're actually insecure about their ability to hold children's attention.
And I get it. Like I've been there too, and I talk about this story. It is so vivid in my mind. And I always say, like, I'm so thankful for the children who challenged me because that they really pushed me to grow. And even like any teachers out there who that's you that Robin was just describing, like that is such an opportunity for your own growth of just like of dealing with your own stuff and acknowledging your own stuff. And I think that is so helpful, not just in the classroom, but just in so many other parts of life and just in relationships in general. But I remember doing the same thing of just like, okay, so here's the story. So Montessori teacher, 3 to 5 years old, and this was kind of like one of my. I think this was the first full year of me teaching. And we got tasked, like we kind of had like somewhat of a vague curriculum of like, hey, teach them about the water cycle. They don't give you like a bunch of direction on how to do it, which I loved because I didn't want to follow things like I want to use my own creativity, whatever. But there's still a challenge of like, okay, like how do I make this real and relevant for a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old? Like the water cycle, like that's such a big concept. And so there are a lot of ways that I did it that were age appropriate, like, talking about evaporation. Like we would take a cup of water and just periodically, like, and I do it sometimes, they do it sometimes. And we had a door that was like to outside and just throw a cup of water on the ground and, talk about like, oh, do you think it's going to come back? Is it going to evaporate? Like, we would just kind of do that. And that made a lot of sense to them. And we would observe the clouds and we do all those things. And I had the bright idea to add to this to make a little diagram because it's a visual, like they need a visual.
Yeah.
So to make a little good diagram, and I worked on it, and I put my teacher effort like, ooh, they're gonna, I'm up the night before like, ooh, they're gonna love this, right? We're gonna bring
Oh,
the circle five, they're gonna love this, right? And so I like we start off and like in Montessori is like a little bit like you kind of do like a presentation, and then like it was a little bit of a hybrid Montessori, so like we like sing songs and move around and stuff. And so I do that, like I did the presentation, it showed them like kind of the new material I brought. Then it was like very active, moving around, everyone's into it, so that's the routine, everyone loves it, whatever. Then it was like, okay, sit down, like I had someone to show you guys, and remember like water cycle. And I started to like I brought up the diagram and I started to talk, and I had been talking for like 5 seconds when a child got up and was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And got up and just walked away. And I tell you, my ego, I was a little hurt in the moment. Like it took a lot for me not to react in that moment. And I wanted to react of like, sit back down there, like I'm not done. Lesson's not over. Right. And I'm still like, again, this is my first year of teaching. This is before my first year of like having my own classroom. So I'm still in the process of the journey of unpacking my own stuff and growing and learning. So my first reaction was like, sit back down. Like we're not done here. Like no one gets up until we're done, and then you can get up and you can make all the choices. But now we're sitting down. That's what I wanted to say, right? But something in me like stopped, and I think at this point I was already kind of like knew like I was working on some stuff. So I'm like, okay, you can get a book, or you can do X, Y, and Z, and just like quietly at the table. There are just some things that are normally available throughout the day. And because there's this also concern that teachers have, like, what if I let one child do it, then everyone's going to want to do it. And if that's true, like if one child is doing like something that is regularly available throughout the day, and they're choosing, and all the children in the classroom are choosing to read that same book that they always have a choice to read instead of focusing on your lesson, then that's a problem with your lesson, not a problem with the children. Yes. Right. And so that's information and data like, okay, I need to adjust something here. Like I need to adjust the way I teach instead of expecting for them to adjust the way they learn to the way that I'm currently teaching. Right. And so he did that. And like he kind of read the book. He got a book and he was reading it. And he was at the table. So it wasn't even far from me, but he just needed to not be sitting down in circle time listening to me talk about the water cycle. And when I moved, and when we went to the more active things, we were doing things and moving with the whole body, he came back and he was like, I want to be a part of this. Right. And then, when it wasn't that, he was like, he was back to doing and reading the book. And that was fine. And everything ran smooth. And I found out later, because I kind of wanted to test, like, let's see if he was listening. Like I kind of was talking to him later in that day about like what I was talking about the water cycle. And he was able to share, like it was clear that he was listening to what I was saying, but he was just doing in his own way.
Yeah.
Right.
And some kids need to be like moving and like hear from a different, like, I used to teach a kid who was echolalic, and he would script all day long, and you would think he wasn't listening. And then all of a sudden he would repeat the whole book back to you. Yeah. Right. Like, yeah. And I was like, how you can recite, all of Frozen while I'm reading the book, but then later tell me the whole book is like a miracle. Like, I don't know how it's happening, but he really could, like, and it was just what he was doing to like regulate his own body. And just give me 1 second. My dog is barking. I'm going to shut the door.
Yeah, okay, cool.
My dog, stop. My husband picked tonight of all nights to go visit a friend. So I'm here with the kid, the dog, everybody. Alone.
It's real life. It's okay.
Yeah. Our teach is nothing but real life. We don't hide. There's no smoke and mirrors here. We have real children.
I bet people appreciate that.
Yeah, I try. There's no other way, because Especially with the pandemic, they're, the kids are just here all the time. We're just used to seeing them. I love that story. And it really, like, I see that so often, especially with like IEPs and stuff. So I'll see goals. The goals obviously are written for the children. But then you look at the goals and, it's always to sit longer through circle time, or to, comply, or to get through a period with no instances of non-compliance. And there really is very seldom a lot of reflection on what is the content of that circle time, or what is this lesson? Is it age appropriate? Is it developmentally appropriate? Is it modified correctly? Is it engaging? Is the teacher like fun? These are things that you can't actually put in an IEP, really. But there are things that are often the missing pieces, right? As I'll go and observe, and it's actually, the teacher is having a hard time connecting with the kids, or what they're doing is either too high, like academically for the kids to grasp, or it's like repetitive and they're bored of it already. So hitting that kind of like, zone of proximal development, if you want to get all teacher school about it, like all of those are important facets to maintaining a child's attention throughout a lesson. But we don't often get to actually talk about that as a team, right? What's working for our kids instructionally, because, the structure of the IEP is just that we talk about, the child's supposed, deficits, without actually talking about, what is working educationally, like on everybody's part.
Like, yeah, and that's like a lot of times where I think a lot of times there are a diagnosis or how we're labeling a child. I'm not even how we're labeling a child is based off of the kind of output of the behavior that we're seeing, but the behavior is being triggered by the environment. And like exactly what you're saying, sometimes it's about the, more times than not, it's about the environment in terms of helping a child be successful. And I think even without having a specific diagnosis on like a child, because very often for young children, like you don't have, they're at 3, like you don't know, or it's hard to know, if someone is autistic or not. And often, like, a lot of times people, it's pushed back later. Let's see later. That might just be them being 3. And sometimes it's like, and so sometimes as a teacher, as a parent, you don't have like a diagnosis to go on. And so that you can work with someone like I'll teach, so that you kind of know generally what to expect and how to help a specific child having specific challenges. But if we can just think about like helping children meet their needs,
yes,
in a healthy way, like I don't, like, you don't need the diagnosis as much. Like it's not like you can help that child still without the without the label,
yep.
right? And I would encourage, especially anyone out there listening who works with young children, has young children, like I kind of break it down to 2 main, like unmet needs and unlearned skills.
Yes.
And we should be helping children identify their needs, meet their needs, and teach them how to meet their needs in a healthy way. Now, when they're young, a lot of times the way that they're going to meet their need is not in the healthiest of ways. And us as adults, we started off this conversation kind of acknowledging that we don't always, I think we lash out, that's not meeting our needs necessarily in a healthy way, right? And so a child might use will use the skills they have in their toolbox, which might be hitting, right? Which might be stimming, which stemming is fine, but it might not be in the way that they're going to use the skills that are in their toolbox. And stimming is something I would say is healthy because they're expressing their emotions and they're not hurting anyone else and they're not hurting themselves. So that's healthy. We want people to express and to regulate. Like that's what we want. But something like hitting another person isn't as healthy because
Right.
someone gets hurt and that creates a lot of conflict. They're going to hit you. It's just not a healthy way to solve the problem, but that's what's in their tool belt. So what we want to do is we want to put more skills in their tool belt. That doesn't mean that's necessarily, we're not going to do all the skill building when their emotions are high and they feel, slighted because they feel like disconnected because they feel misunderstood because someone else is getting the connection that they're wanting. Like that's not necessarily the time to teach the skill, but it's likely the time to meet the need and help them meet the need, identify what they're feeling and help them kind of, regulate. And then the skill to solve the problem will be way more effective after they're a little bit more regulated, closer to balanced, or maybe even at a different time. But helping children identify their needs, meet their needs, us meeting their needs through co-regulation, helping them learn and meet their own needs over time. One last bit on it to kind of bring it around full circle to what we were saying earlier. When the person who comments on your shirt or says something, about, or leaves a comment in my section about, I don't know, hitting children, or you don't, who are you to be talking, to be sharing what you're sharing, and you're not a parent, our reaction, my reaction, your reaction, one probably in part has to do with maybe our own insecurities if we have a reaction. And then two, like, is there this unmet need, like of this need to feel significant, to feel worthy, to feel whatever. And this comment is triggering kind of that unmet need that we have ourselves. And so so we get reactive and we'll give them a talk or do whatever, right? And that's not always but maybe so responding and holding a boundary, maybe that is the healthy way because you still want to express it. Maybe it's, there's a lot of ways to handle, the hitting, there's a lot of ways to handle things on the comment section, the child who's, getting up in the middle of circle. There's lots of ways to meet the needs in a healthy way. And we want to teach children to use their skills to find the healthy way. We want to practice that ourselves so that we can model it for children. And we'll be so much more effective at teaching it when we can do that.
You're giving me so much to think about my own TikTok behavior. It's funny.
I do kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I watch them and I'm like, ooh, like I still take pleasure in watching, to be honest with you. I take pleasure sometimes in watching the drama of whatever. And I guess that's why a lot of,
Well,
that's,
I'm retired. I'm retired from drama. So
are you?
I'm done. It's been real fun. But I got it. It's easy, when you're passionate about something to, react because it's, and people, and you see it, right? Because people don't see what we see because they see a small sample, right? So most people see their own children, their school, and their own experience of school. And if they're teachers, they see the school that they're in and maybe another school they worked in, right? So they're seeing a really small sample size. And so it really is, but if you're working in multiple schools, how bad it is, right? Like it becomes like this intimate knowledge of how violent schools can be for neurodivergent kids specifically, right? And
Yeah.
so when I hear people, I get a lot of pushback from, behaviorist people who are like, it's not like that now. It's not, and this whole thing. And it is, but they are speaking from a relative, well, at my place where I work, it's not like that.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't really, help the parents whose kids are in a school where it is like that. And so it's easy for me, like, to get like, you don't know, like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I get like, I have to be like, okay, like, that's not going to work. They're not actually going to see it. And there's no way. And like, do I want everyone to have to see that? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, not everyone should see that because it's horrifying. And so it's like this tricky line of being like, I know you think you're doing something, and I'm glad where you work is nice. But like, that's not actually like a, representative sample. I'll put it that way. So I have to like temper my response a little bit so that I can like educate, but without being like, you don't know what you're talking about, whatever, because I don't want to, belittle people. That's not what we're here to do. But in the same sense, I also, it's so emotional because most of the time I've just gotten off the phone with someone whose kid actually is being abused in a school.
Right. All of these dynamics, like, and I think your responses, I think, it's not about like don't responding. It's just, like how you respond. But like, you are right. Like, in terms of like your experience, like we have these vastly different experiences, right? And the kind of you don't know what you're talking about. And it's not just like to not diminish the other person, but if you want them to like really see what you're saying, they may not see it the same way, but to kind of like approach the conversation with an open mind, the quickest way to like shut that down is to start judgment towards the other person, right? Automatic, there's defensiveness, and it's me against you, and now we're battling, and it's like, who's gonna win?
Right.
And that doesn't move towards either of our goals. But what you're saying in terms of is like, and you not only do you have probably like just the experience of seeing it as an adult, you probably have your own. I know you mentioned that like you didn't find out until you were like older that you were autistic, but you may still even have some experiences.
Oh yeah, my teachers used to dump my desk on the ground and like make me pick it up in front of everybody. Like, I mean, like all sorts of horrific abuses at school.
Right. So like that stuff is like, those are your triggers. Like though, like that's, and so you're gonna likely, and that's kind of like kind of started like you're gonna get like triggered doing this work. And I don't think, and anyone on social media who's like doing any kind of work of any, especially even if you're not doing anything like of like value important, I think there's always going to be commenters and people who like say a bunch of stuff, but like especially in the work that you're doing, and that like it's triggering for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and if you like dedicating, like you feel like this is, you're a behaviorist like at heart, and you feel like that's your identity, and I'm dedicating my life to it, and I feel like I'm helping, and now you're saying that I'm not helping, or that this method that I wholeheartedly believe I've wrapped my identity in is actually hurting the children that I really care about, that I genuinely care about and really want to help, is why I'm dedicating my life's work to it. Like that's going to be triggering for them. And so like, then it becomes two triggered people, like just trying to win.
Like the trauma echo chamber.
Right. Trauma echo chamber. Yes. And the child whoever the children they're working with isn't being helped. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely toned down my approach with that like quite significantly, and I've had to really learn myself like when I'm not in a good space to make that type of content. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't periodically I do restraint and seclusion bits, right? Like I can do videos about restraint and seclusion for, you know, a week, right? If I'm like pretty good, like otherwise, right? Like my life is, you know, calm for the most part. And I
Yeah.
have, you know, the emotional bandwidth to deal with the comments because they are
Yes.
atrocious. And there's a lot of defense of, you know, people like really like vehemently defend like restraining children, which is like unsettling to say the least. But I have to
I feel
actually like put
I'm
myself in a
sorry to
good
interrupt.
place.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel the exact like I couldn't my impulse control, like I couldn't hold it in. I'm sorry.
No, you're
That's
good.
a skill I need to work on.
You're all good.
I I feel the exact same way about like spanking content and stuff
Yes.
because it's something I'm really passionate about talking about, but I get very triggered by the comments a lot of times when people hop on and just like will just defend hitting children till their grave and will attack other and even go as far to attack other people who you know don't and just yeah that triggers me and I know that like when I'm making that content I'm like here we go. Let's see what happens. And I just know that even when I click on, when I go on like TikTok or whatever, and I feel like TikTok is so much, I don't know what it is about TikTok. I think it's probably because of the For You page and
Yeah.
it's just, it goes to people outside of your community. And that's when the comments get nasty. But I know when I click on TikTok and I click on like that video and I read the comments, that like there's gonna be triggering. So I go in there with that expectation. It's like the same thing of just like the okay, like when I have to hold a boundary, like with a child, like I know there's gonna be like some blowback and like I'm going into it just like I'm safe, like I'm secure, and to just respond as much. And sometimes I don't like. You could go back in some of my videos, and I'm responding in a way that's not very healthy or not very helpful. You know, and it was just how I was feeling in the moment. And I was, you know what, I'm about to sass. I'm about to sass
I know.
back.
I've had ones where I start making the video and my mouth opens to say, "What the actual?" And I'm like, "Okay, Robin, put the phone down." I said, "What Jesus?" Like, and I'm like, if it opens with like an expletive, you got to put the phone. You got to stop. Because I've had lots of times where I actually want to start the video with, "You have to be effing kidding me." And then I'm like, you know what? That's not helpful. I'm going to
Yeah.
actually take a day, take a beat, and reflect so I can respond.
Yeah.
But it because you care, it can be so, you know, and because like, I don't know if you feel this way, but when that happens to me and I see like people, teachers come out of the woodwork to defend restraint and seclusion. This is typically what's the most triggering. And that's like the hill they're going to die on.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of how far we have to go, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's heavy. Like it's a very heavy weight because it's suddenly so visible, right?
Yeah.
How entrenched it is
Yeah.
and how far away the finish line is. And it's like all of a sudden like there in your face. And it can just be, and as an, you know, I'm, you know, as a neurodivergent person or like, you know, someone who is marginalized in society in any way, right? You're seeing it in this very real and visceral way. And it, you like, as a creator, like I found that I need to like sometimes be like, okay, I can't make another video like this for another like 2-3 weeks at least because it's just too much. And you want to do it to educate, but then in the same sense, you have to take care of yourself so that you can educate and not
Right.
flip people
Burn out.
off in response videos.
Yeah. And one thing that I think, I don't know, I don't know if this will be helpful for you or not, because you mentioned we're so far from the finish line. And I think just thinking about it as a finish line is so stressful. And I
Right.
feel like for me, where a lot of because it feels like I have to get there, I have to get there. And knowing that I'm just on a small part
Yeah.
of the overall the forever journey that we have to go, and that like it's okay if I die and we're not there yet, but as long as I move the needle a little bit, like
Yeah,
it's been like where like that was my purpose, and maybe someone else is going to, carry the torch, and like it's like, but I don't have to stop spanking in the world before I die or
right.
before the end of because just that thought is already
It's
stressful in
it's
itself.
very stressful.
And then it makes me want to like now I feel like I have to come out with my sword and I have to fight. Like there's a lot of work, so like
Yeah, no, that is yeah, that you're so good, Mr. Chaz. This has been very therapeutic for me. Um,
same. This has been a really good conversation. I really appreciated
it's always nice
talking
to
to you.
like talk to talk to other creators that do this type of work because what we do is similar, it's aligned, it's not exactly the same, but I think we have the same goals, different flavors probably, different corners of the world that we're working in, but we've always been aligned philosophically. And so hearing you talk about how you manage it is so helpful because it can be really isolating sometimes,
Yeah.
and really stressful because you are in some ways holding a lot,
Yeah.
right, for others, and it can be itself, a bit heavy sometimes,
Yeah.
but also some days are like amazing, right? You feel you have a conversation where you really help somebody, or you get that like follow-up email that like I did what you said, and things are so much better. You get like a cute
Yeah.
video of a kid. I get like great videos of people like, look, my kid's language is exploding, like or
I
we're
know.
potty trained, like that to me, like obviously makes it makes it all worthwhile. So
Moving the needle. I said moving the needle just a little bit.
that's right. We have, I mean, TikTok has been, so amazing. I mean, I get to meet people like you that I would have, probably not crossed paths with, but now I feel like we're very much. I saw a picture of you and Mona Delahook on Facebook, and I was
Yeah.
jealous.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. I saw her. Yes. I met her in Alexandria, which is right near DC. And she was doing a training, and she was a great person to meet. We had some conversation, we had lunch. It was really
Now I'm even
great.
more jealous. I
Well,
mean, I'm
maybe
so
we'll
happy
connect.
for you.
Well, maybe one day we'll all get together, we'll all cross paths. Maybe you're in New York, right? You said you're in New
Yeah, I'm in
York?
Jersey.
In Jersey. Yeah, maybe she's in LA, so she's like on the other. I was in Virginia, but now I'm in North Carolina, but maybe we'll all get together and be like, hey, Robin, come on, like
I
she's
know. Well,
she's gonna
she
be
does a
here.
lot of stuff. She does a lot of stuff with the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, and as do I.
Yes.
And so we're like kind of like we've always been like adjacent, and like stuff like that. But I don't actually know her, and I would like to one day. Anyway, well, we are. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah.
We have about like 2 minutes. Anything that you want to, share about what you're doing, where people can find you, and then we'll end the broadcast.
Yes. As I said before, you can get one-on-one coaching with me through www.patreon.com/Mr. Chazz. And there are a variety of different options of just, you can pick whatever fits best for your family. So you can check me out. We can connect most intimately there. Um, I also have a podcast, which Robin was on. She was like on one of the I feel like you were like the second or third episode.
I know
Um,
someone was like, when you were on the Autistic Tea Party, they were like, "Oh, Mr. Chazz." I was like, I was on Mr. Chazz's podcast like very early.
yes, yes, and we had a great, another long conversation there. So check that out. But I'm also on the Facebook, the Facebook. I'm on I'm on Facebook as Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz. There's a space. Instagram, Mr. Chazz. TikTok, Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz. No space. And if you're watching this from YouTube, I have like a YouTube channel for kids with a little bit of content. There's like some songs and like a little bit of like activity. there, but there's more. I'm gonna check that out. People really love the turtle song. It's a song about kind of just that can about self-regulation, and it's really cute. So
Oh my gosh,
check that out.
I'm gonna play it for my daughter tonight. She's gonna love it. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Mr. Chazz, a fantastic friend of All Teach and doer of good in the world. So we appreciate you so much. I'm gonna end the broadcast right now.